I was just a small-town girl, but I had an arranged marriage with Ezekiel, the golden boy of the city. At 17, Ezekiel went blind. To take care of him, I moved to the big city. Ezekiel was moody and quick to anger, often throwing dishes at me. "If you come any closer, I'll kill you." I snorted softly and pressed him down, forcefully pouring medicine into his mouth. I stayed by his side until he recovered and could see again. Just when I thought he had finally accepted me, his unforgettable first love returned. That day, Ezekiel, avoiding my gaze, asked me, "Is there anything you want?" When I said the 4 words break off the engagement, he visibly sighed in relief. Chapter 1. Ezekiel, as usual, was uncooperative. The hospital caretaker and Nanny Lee had gone to eat, and I didn't want to bother them, so I directly straddled his waist. While he wasn't paying attention, I tied up his hands and forced him to take the medicine. He was furious, his voice low and filled with anger. "Get off me. Where the hell did you learn this?" I sniffed the half-full medicinal soup, shivering at the bitterness. "Learn what?" Ezekiel gritted his teeth. "Sitting on a man's waist like that," imitating his usual frown. I corrected him disapprovingly. "Grandpa Ma said that when you turn 22, we'll be getting our marriage certificate. I'm your future wife. So what's the big deal about sitting on you?" Ezekiel's ears turned faintly red, and his voice sounded a bit hoarse. "You don't know a damn thing. I'll drink the medicine myself. Now get off." Since I had achieved my goal, I didn't bother opposing him anymore. I jumped off him, not forgetting to raise my fist and give it a playful shake. I seriously threatened him, "If you don't drink your medicine properly next time, I'll make you take it like I did today." Ezekiel paused as he drank the medicine. I had no idea what he was thinking. Chapter 2. Ezekiel's temper wasn't as bad as before. Maybe it had to do with his imminent recovery. I looked at myself in the mirror, and I was starting to feel a little insecure about my appearance, even though my aunts always said I was the prettiest girl in town. The truth was, in the big city, there were girls 1,000 times prettier than me, doll-like girls. Also, I had a few tiny freckles under my eyes. I sighed, feeling discouraged, and went upstairs to the music room to find Ezekiel. Chapter 3. "Hey, Ezekiel, what do you imagine I look like?" I sat close to him, gazing at him eagerly. Ezekiel had gotten used to me sticking so close to him. He ran his hand over the violin and, without even looking up, spat out one word: "Ugly." His sharp tongue still hadn't changed. I smacked him and stood up in a huff, fuming. "I'm not ugly," Ezekiel snorted coldly, his tone casual. "Come here." I walked up to him. Ezekiel unexpectedly cupped my face with his hands, even though I knew his eyes were wrapped in bandages and he couldn't see anything. Heat still crept up my cheeks uncontrollably. What are you doing?" I stammered, feeling flustered. Ezekiel didn't respond, his fingertips brushing from my forehead to my eyes. Finally, they stopped at my chin. Then he said calmly, "Not much to look at." I froze. "What?" Ezekiel let go of me, lazily leaning back on the sofa. "You really don't look that great. Whether it's your features or bone structure." There wasn't the usual mischievous smile on his lips. He was stating it like it was a matter of fact. When I was little, my grandmother would always scold me for not being sharp enough, whether it was being teased by classmates, having money stolen by pickpockets, or being chased around by my mom with a hanger. I would always be able to laugh about it quickly after, but this was the first time I cried from anger, because I felt insecure and embarrassed in front of the boy I liked. Tears welled up and fell onto the wooden floor. In the quiet room, the sound was amplified several times. Ezekiel's hand, which had been plucking the strings, paused for a moment. He knew I was crying, but he said nothing. He just let me pretend like nothing had happened as I left. Chapter 4. Ezekiel and I started the silent treatment. Well, to be accurate, it was me giving him the cold shoulder. After all, he had never been the one to seek me out. "Nanda, young master has already broken 5 bowls and still refuses to take his medicine. You're the only one who can handle him. Go upstairs and persuade him." Nanny Lee was so anxious she was circling around me. My head felt dizzy, and I shook it. You can have the caretakers hold him down and force him to take it. I'm not going upstairs. At mealtime, it was the same. The moment I saw Ezekiel being helped down the stairs, I immediately buried my head in my bowl of rice. I managed to finish just as he sat down beside me and put down my empty bowl. I smiled at everyone. I'm done. Heading back to my room. Just as I stood up, Ezekiel threw his chopsticks. Chapter 5. During our Cold War, I made a new friend. It was Nanny Lee's son, Dominic. It was like every nerve in his body was infused with humor. I loved hanging out with him, but the gloomy Ezekiel couldn't stand the cheerful Dominic. Whenever Dominic started teaching me how to play games, Ezekiel would have Nanny Lee call Dominic away to run errands or do odd jobs for him. That afternoon, Nanny Lee went out to buy groceries. Dominic and I were in the living room, watching laughter in Waikiki, laughing so hard that tears were coming out. Suddenly, there was a loud shattering sound from Ezekiel's room upstairs. I immediately ran upstairs. When I opened the door, I saw Ezekiel standing barefoot in the broken glass, his lips pressed into a tight line. Blood was oozing from everywhere, spreading out over the floor. I rushed over to help him, terrified. Ezekiel, why are you walking around by yourself? He sneered, pushing my hand away, his jaw tightening slightly. What does it have to do with you? Aren't you planning to ignore me for the rest of your life? There was a rare trace of vulnerability in his usually arrogant stance. Ezekiel's blood kept flowing. I was scared and had no choice but to soften my tone, trying to coax him. I wasn't ignoring you. Be good. Ezekiel, let me help you to the sofa so I can bandage you up, okay? Ezekiel stayed silent for a few seconds, finally placing his hand on my shoulder. But I couldn't support him by myself, so I quickly called Dominic upstairs to help. However, the moment Dominic touched Ezekiel's arm, Ezekiel immediately shook him off. Get lost. Ezekiel, who I had just calmed down, was now completely riled up again. Dominic silently rolled his eyes and whispered in my ear. He's got a mouth full of laxatives. I can't be bothered with him. I looked at him, puzzled. What do you mean? The moment he opens his mouth, he talks about needing to poop. Dominic really had a whole library of sayings. In the end, I struggled to get Ezekiel over to the sofa by myself. Chapter 6. After the family doctor bandaged Ezekiel's wounds, the room was left with just the two of us. I was about to get up to pour him a glass of water when he grabbed my wrist. Ezekiel's voice was somewhat urgent. I'm sorry, HM? At first, I didn't understand. A few seconds later, I realized he was apologizing for saying I didn't look great the other day. I fell silent and tugged at my wrist. Instead, Ezekiel tightened his grip, pulling me in front of him. I almost fell onto him. What are you doing? I was a little annoyed. Let go of me. He lifted my hand and slapped himself hard across the face. I was stunned. Ezekiel's voice dropped. Does that make you feel better? If not, you can hit me a few more times. It was the first time I'd ever seen him lower his pride. His voice sounded despondent. Can we make up now, Fernanda? Chapter 7. After our Cold War ended, things between Ezekiel and me still felt a bit awkward and stiff. I still preferred hanging out with Dominic. The final push to fully reconcile came when Ezekiel started acting up again. He refused to take his medicine. I tried persuading him a few times, but eventually lost my patience and threatened him. I warned you, if you don't take your medicine, I'll hold you down and make you take it like last time. Ezekiel slouched against the headboard, lazily. His tone was indifferent. You think you can pin me down again? Last time was just a fluke. He really had a sharp tongue. He sparked my competitive spirit. So I, just like before, took advantage of his carelessness, straddled him, and pinned him down. The whole sequence of actions was smooth and fluid. I knew Ezekiel was all talk. This time, forcing him to take the medicine was even easier than last time. Just as I was about to mock him, he grabbed me by the waist. Stay away from Dominic. The room was dimly lit. Ezekiel's face was hidden in the shadows, making it hard to see his expression, but I could see the faint redness on his ears. If you like playing games, I can teach you, but stop getting so close to him. The last sentence was practically spoken through gritted teeth. I wrinkled my nose. I had a feeling something was off about Ezekiel's medicine today. Otherwise, why did it smell so much like jealousy? Chapter 8. When Ezekiel was getting his bandages removed at the hospital, my palms were sweating with nerves. I thought, if the first look he gives me is one of disgust, I'll punch him twice and blind him completely. Thankfully, he didn't. He just raised an eyebrow slightly, then naturally took my hand. Let's go. Come with me to pick up a report before we head home. I looked at our fingers interlocked, blinking slowly. It wasn't until we were almost home that I finally gathered the courage. Ezekiel. He turned his head to look at me. I was just about to ask if we were in a relationship when, a sweet, melodious female voice interrupted me. Ezekiel turned toward the sound. Almost instantly, he let go of my hand, as if tossing away trash. That was the first time I saw, and the first time I heard of, Elise. Chapter 9. For a brief moment, emotions surged in Ezekiel's eyes, but by the time Elise ran up to us, his expression had returned to calm. Guess why I'm back this time? She blinked playfully at the both of us. Ezekiel's tone was lazy, and he threw out a single word. Say it. Elise didn't mind his attitude and turned to me, acting as if we were old friends, saying, I'm here to teach you some manners. Ezekiel's little fiancé. I let out a questioning huh. Ezekiel's grandfather and my grandfather were from the same town, and they were very close. Grandpa Mom moved to the city later and built the family's current empire. After my grandfather passed away, he wanted to look after our family, but my parents refused to take his money. So when I was about 1 or 2, they arranged a marriage between Ezekiel and me. The agreement was that we'd get engaged at 18 and married at 22, but Ezekiel's mother never liked me. Elise had been invited by Ezekiel's mom this time. She was here to teach me all sorts of elite etiquette and broaden my horizons, to make sure I wouldn't embarrass myself at the engagement party a year from now. There was 1 month left until the start of my senior year. I had to completely transform into the person they'd be satisfied with before going back to my hometown. Chapter 10. Ezekiel's brow furrowed, his lips tightening as he said to Elise, Are you out of your mind? What does any of this have to do with you? Does she need your teaching? Elise, who do you think you are? His anger came out of nowhere. Elisa's smile slowly faded, and she looked away. Her tone was light, but forced. So, you hate me this much now. I'll try to avoid seeing you then. Sorry to bother you. As she turned to leave, both Ezekiel and I saw the redness in her eyes. I lowered my head and gloomily kicked a small stone in front of me. It didn't make sense to me. If Ezekiel hated her so much, why did he immediately let go of my hand when he saw her? I snapped back to reality, just about to ask him, and then I found myself staring right into his eyes. Ezekiel bent down, leaning closer to my face. Then he flicked my forehead with a teasing grin. What are you thinking, little fiancé? The mockery in his eyes was overflowing. I was successfully distracted. My face heated up uncontrollably, and I chased after him, hitting him a few times. Chapter 11. At first, I had a pretty good impression of Elise, but after a few days, I was exhausted from realizing how strict she was. She held up 4 fingers to me, her face expressionless. This is your 4th mistake. I really don't get it. How can making tea be this hard? I muttered in defense. I followed your instructions exactly. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Why are you talking back? Are you saying I, after 17 years of training, still don't know how to do it? I pressed my lips together and accidentally glanced at the camera on the living room TV cabinet. I quickly said, the surveillance footage can prove it. In the next second, Elise casually threw the teacup onto the table. Scalding water dripped down onto the floor. I can't teach you. She lifted her eyes, calmly surveying me. You're not just stubborn. You have this lingering rural small-town air about you. Do you understand? It's like you're the type who'd argue with a vegetable seller at the market over $2. I really hated that condescending look in her eyes. I stood up abruptly, slamming my cup down. Just as I was about to speak, Elise let out a low yelp. She clutched her hand. The water was almost boiling. I gave her a suspicious glance and awkwardly asked, Did I burn you? She just kept holding her hand without saying anything. Elise insisted on using boiling water for tea practice, and I had burned myself countless times because of it. I even carried burn ointment with me lately. I huffed softly, taking out the ointment from my bag with a hint of satisfaction. Serves you right for looking down on $2. But just as I reached out to hand it to her, a hand slapped mine away. Get lost. Ezekiel hadn't held back. My hand was left red from the slap. I didn't even notice when he had returned. He wrapped his hands around Elise's shoulders and carefully guided her to the sink to cool her hand. I stood quietly where I was, waiting until they returned to the living room. Before I spoke to Ezekiel, "Can you at least understand the situation before hitting me?" What? Ezekiel cut me off, the sneer on his lips making me feel ridiculous. Didn't you say she deserved it? Or did I hear that wrong? Fernanda, I'm warning you very seriously. His dark eyes bore into me, cold and unfamiliar. Her hands are for playing the violin. I'll let it go this time. But if you can't stop this habit of yours, then go back to your countryside. I was so furious that I became calm. I met his gaze and nodded. I won't stop. I'm leaving right now. After saying that, I walked straight to the door without hesitation. Behind me, I heard Ezekiel's voice, gritting through his teeth. Fernanda, Elise followed up, saying, "Ease, don't chase her. She can't bear to leave your family." Chapter 12. I wandered around the villa district for half an hour but still couldn't find my way out. I hadn't brought my phone either. Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore and sat down by a fountain, crying aloud. Between sobs, I cursed Ezekiel and Elise for being out of their minds. I cried until I was exhausted, took a break, then cried some more. By the time my eyes were swollen like walnuts, Dominic found me. I reached out to him, choking up as I said, "Can you get my phone? I want to book a ticket home." Dominic shook his finger at me. Nope. I blinked at him, speechless. Using Dominic's phone, I called Grandpa Ma. He told me not to rush home and not to speak out of anger. He would be back in 10 days. I silently stood my ground, not agreeing to anything. Dominic nudged me with his elbow. "Why are you leaving? You didn't do anything wrong, so why not stay here for 10 days? Eat and live for free? I'll show you a good time during those 10 days. After a lot of internal debate, I agreed. Besides, if I was going to break off the engagement, I should probably do it face to face with Grandpa Ma. Even I wasn't that dense. It was obvious now, Ezekiel and Elise had more than just a simple connection. No wonder Ezekiel spent all that time in the music room while he was blind, polishing that violin. I didn't want to get involved with the two of them, and I didn't want to like Ezekiel anymore either. Chapter 13. When I got back to the villa, neither of them was in the living room. The next morning, when Ezekiel came down for breakfast and saw me, he just raised an eyebrow, as if he had expected it. He seemed to have forgotten about last night's unpleasantness. He knocked lightly on the table in front of me and said in an emotionless tone, "Grandpa insists I take you shopping, but I've got things to do today. Is there anything you want to buy?" I quietly scooped a spoonful of porridge and shook my head. Dominic chimed in just in time. "I'll take her out today. If there's anything she wants, I'll buy it for her." Ezekiel looked like he'd just gotten rid of a troublesome task. His brows relaxed. "Sounds good. Great." He tossed a card onto the table. "Buy whatever you want. There's no pin. Enjoy your breakfast. I'm heading out. Hope you two have fun." Even his retreating figure radiated impatience. It was obvious who he was going to see. Dominic tilted his head at me. "Hey, even with your face buried in your food, I can tell you've been crying." Chapter 14. Neither Dominic nor I so much as glanced at the card on the table as we headed out. We roamed the mall until the afternoon, completely exhausted. Just as we were about to leave, I saw Ezekiel and Elise outside a luxury handbag store. "Ease, this bag's color is way too flashy. I can't appreciate it. Why don't you buy it for your fiancé?" Ezekiel's expression darkened, but he still pulled out a lazy smile. "Sure, we're getting engaged next year. Make sure you attend." "Ezekiel!" Elise stomped her foot, tears welling up in her eyes. I had never seen Ezekiel like this before. He smiled bitterly, pain evident in his eyes. Do you get some kind of thrill from stringing me along? Was it that I didn't confess? Or that I didn't try hard enough? Elise, don't forget, you were the one who rejected me, over and over again. Elise stared at him, letting her tears fall. You still don't understand why I haven't said yes. It's because of that damned arranged marriage you can't get out of. You can't say no to your grandfather. Ezekiel stood up from the couch, his voice firm. I can say no. I could go right now and break off the engagement with her. I'll send her away. Elise hugged him, and just like that, they were back together. Dominic listened and calmly remarked, "They're both nuts. If I were the store clerk, I'd be cursing them out in my head. They didn't buy a single thing and put on this whole soap opera." I let out a humorless laugh, then suddenly made up my mind. Chapter 15. That night, I knocked on Ezekiel's door. When he saw me, he unconsciously frowned, clearly not wanting to see me. "What is it?" I was too tired to argue with him. I missed the small flower field my dad had bought for me back home. "Ezekiel, let's call off the engagement. I want to go home." He stared at me for a long time before speaking with an ambiguous tone. "Are you serious?" I nodded. Ezekiel let out a visible sigh of relief. "Tell me what compensation you want. I'll get you on the earliest flight tomorrow. How's that?" Rubbing his temples, he muttered, "The sooner you leave, the sooner I'm free." Chapter 16. When Grandpa Ma found out, he called again, giving me a long speech trying to convince me. I stayed quiet for a while before softly replying, "But he doesn't like me." Grandpa Ma's voice abruptly stopped. I sat on the balcony, feeling the cool breeze, my gaze distant. "Grandpa, I've already tried my best, but some things can't be achieved just by trying." And so, the engagement was easily dissolved. Chapter 17. I left by train that same night, without telling Ezekiel. Dominic and the driver uncle saw me off. I slung my backpack over my shoulder, grabbed my suitcase, and waved. "Bye. I'm heading in. Come visit me in my hometown when you get the chance." Dominic had been quiet the whole way. Suddenly, he pulled me into a tight hug. "Nanda, you've been wronged. Just wait. I'll sneak cockroaches into those two jerks' bowls every day to get back at them for you." I laughed and patted his back. The collar of my shirt got a little damp. Only then did it hit me. I hadn't come here for nothing after all. At 8 in the morning, I was nearing my stop. That's when I got a call from Ezekiel. "Why didn't you tell me you were leaving?" His tone was flat, with a hint of something unreadable. "No need," I replied. There was a brief pause, and then Ezekiel chuckled lightly. "Fair enough. Hope you find someone more suitable." I hung up the phone, grabbed my luggage, and got off the train. At the station exit, I threw myself into my parents' arms. "I'm home! I'm home! Did you take care of my flower field while I was gone?" Chapter 18. When Fernanda refused Ezekiel's offer to buy her a ticket, he was actually quite irritated. His first thought was, she's probably just trying to stall, not wanting to leave, right? He even considered that if she didn't leave by noon the next day, he'd have her luggage thrown out to force her to go. But to his surprise, Fernanda left in the middle of the night, as if she couldn't wait to escape him. Ezekiel was silent for a while, telling himself that this was for the best. Finally, he could be with Elise openly, but while having breakfast, he still slammed his chopsticks down. A strange, simmering anger was bubbling up inside him. Ezekiel curled his lips into a cold smile. "Ungrateful. Huh." He turned to Dominic and asked, "Was I not better to her than you were? She asked you to take her to the station but didn't even tell me she was leaving." Dominic, chewing gum, deliberately used the most casual tone to provoke him. "Because Nanda's disgusted by you. Obviously. We all saw what happened at the mall that day." Ezekiel felt a sudden pang of unease in his chest. He never meant to hurt Fernanda. He just didn't like her that much. After he got together with Elise, Ezekiel treated her even better than before. He rarely thought of Fernanda anymore, but every now and then, he'd feel a bit off. That feeling usually crept up when he hugged or kissed Elise. One evening, Ezekiel sat down for dinner and noticed a particular dish. He instinctively told Nanny Lee, Take this away. Did you forget that Fernanda is allergic to seafood? Nanny Lee sighed and gently reminded him. Young master, Nanda's been gone for almost half a year now. Ezekiel froze. For some inexplicable reason, he still had Nanny Lee throw out the dish. That night, he declined Elisa's offer for a date. Instead, he sat staring into space on his gaming chair. He realized something. He might miss Fernanda a little. Chapter 19. The summer after I graduated high school, I ran into Ezekiel and Elise again. It was at a guest house in my hometown. They were here on vacation. I was carrying several bunches of sunflowers when I accidentally bumped into Elise. Tisk. Watch where you're going. She clutched her bag protectively, grumbling. I struggled to peek out from between the flower stems. Sorry about that. When Elise saw it was me, her expression froze for a moment. Then she shot a dark look at Ezekiel, who was staring intently at me. Elise quickly plastered a smile back on, adjusting her sunglasses and smirking. So, it's you. Forget it. I won't hold it against you. No point in making you pay for it, right? It's not like you could afford it anyway. I angrily pushed the sunflowers aside and stared straight at her. How much? I'll pay you. My family owns 2 goose houses in town. We have cars, a house, and a flower field. There's no way I can't afford a bag. Elise held up one finger. 1 million, including the limited edition tag. My head dropped lower than the wilting sunflowers. Ezekiel pulled Elise back and said to me quietly, "She's joking. You can go," with a red face. I muttered a small apology to Elise before leaving. I hoped they'd be gone in a day or two. At around 11 p.m., I was working the front desk. Suddenly, the landline rang. "Hello, this is Orange Guest House." There was silence on the other end. A few seconds later, a low, raspy voice came through the line. "Fernanda." It was Ezekiel. "I'm lost, and my phone's about to die. Can you come get me?" Annoying. Dad was already asleep. The only other person at the front desk with me was a girl younger than me by a few months. I added Ezekiel on the guest house's official WeChat. After he sent me his location, I hopped on my pink electric tricycle to pick him up. Somehow, Ezekiel had wandered onto the edge of the fields. It was pitch black out there. No streetlights at all. The tricycle couldn't make it through. So I called out to him, "Ezekiel, you'll have to walk over here." He frowned and turned slightly in my direction. "I have really bad night blindness. I can't see the path." I turned on my flashlight and pointed it at the ground in front of him. "You can walk now." The light was still pretty dim. I could see Ezekiel squinting, as if trying to make out the road. But after a few steps, he stumbled and fell. I stared at him blankly for nearly half a minute, only then realizing he wasn't faking it. I picked up a stick and walked over to him. "Here, grab this." Ezekiel grabbed the stick and wobbled to his feet. We walked in silence, one behind the other. After a while, Ezekiel suddenly spoke, breaking the quiet. "Do you remember?" He chuckled softly. "A year ago, when I was blind, you always led me like this. But back then, there was no stick." I pretended not to hear him, having no desire to chat. Ezekiel suddenly stopped walking. His tone was much calmer than before. "Do you hate me so much that you can't even say a word to me?" Clinging to the last shred of professionalism I had as a guest house employee, I turned back. "Are you coming or not?" Ezekiel's figure faded into the darkness. Suddenly, his old spoiled attitude flared up, and he let go of the stick. "Forget it. Go back on your own. If you hate me this much, you shouldn't have come to get me." A mocking smile tugged at his lips. "I'm not going to die out here." Without a second of hesitation, I threw the stick aside and turned to leave. A year had passed. He hadn't changed at all, still as infuriating as ever. Chapter 20. My frustration peaked when I saw that they had booked a room for 2 weeks. I was planning to leave the next morning and spend 2 weeks at my grandmother's place in the countryside. But just before I left, I saw Dominic running toward me at the entrance of the guest house. "Fernanda." He tossed his suitcase aside and scooped me up in a big hug. In my excitement, I jumped down from him and accidentally stomped on his foot. Sorry," I mumbled, feeling a bit embarrassed. Dominic froze in place, not moving. He seemed fine, but he was definitely hurting a little. He explained that he had come with Ezekiel and Elise. He didn't want to come, but Nanny Lee wasn't comfortable with Ezekiel being unattended. So she sent Dominic, who was the same age as Ezekiel, to look after him. There was a mix of self-deprecation and numb acceptance in Dominic's voice as he spoke. Nanny Lee had worked for the Ma family for over 20 years. She had watched Ezekiel grow up. Sometimes, her concern for Ezekiel even outweighed her care for Dominic, not wanting him to feel upset. I awkwardly changed the subject. I helped him walk inside, but as soon as I turned around, I ran straight into Ezekiel. He was leaning casually against the doorframe. Who knows how long he'd been watching? You too. His gaze landed on Dominic's arm draped over my shoulder. Are you together now? Dominic smiled and replied, There's no need to tell you that, young master. Ezekiel raised an eyebrow knowingly. No? Why aren't you? The voice came from Elise, who had just walked out of the guest house. She pointed at us with her freshly manicured nails. You two make a great pair. Yeah, the small-town girl and the nanny's son. There it was again, that condescending tone. I stared at her for 2 seconds, then helped Dominic sit down. I quickly ran to my pink electric tricycle, grabbed the megaphone tied to it, and without a word, aimed it at Elise. My voice was loud enough for the guests at the nearby goose houses to hear. You look down on farmers. Huh? Elise, do you look down on farmers? Passers-by stopped to look, and the guests peeked out from their windows. Elisa's whole body stiffened. Her eyes darted around, flustered and angry. What are you talking about? Are you crazy? I didn't care and kept looping the 2 lines through the megaphone. In less than a minute, Elise couldn't take it anymore. She ran over to me. Fine, fine. I admit I said the wrong thing. Turn it off. I raised the megaphone higher, out of her reach. Aren't you going to apologize? Sorry, sorry, sorry. Elise clasped her hands together, apologized to me, and then went over to apologize to Dominic. After I turned off the megaphone, I accidentally locked eyes with Ezekiel. He was staring at me, smiling. His shoulders were trembling slightly, and there was a hint of warmth in his eyes. I'd seen that look before. He used to look at Elise like that all the time. I quickly looked away and helped Dominic inside to rest. Chapter 21. Even though Elise clearly resented me, she offered to pay me to be their tour guide for the next 2 weeks. At that moment, I was wearing overalls, a straw hat with a small daisy pinned to it, and holding garden shears as I trimmed the bushes outside the guest house. No, I bluntly turned her down without even looking at her. You're up to no good. Ezekiel let out a chuckle from the side. When I looked up, he cleared his throat and stifled his laughter. Elise wasn't ready to give up. I'll pay you $5,000 a day. No, can you stop bothering me? I continued trimming the bushes, imagining they were her, and vented my frustration through the shears. $10,000 a day. I paused for a moment but chose to ignore her again. Elise gritted her teeth and raised her offer. $30,000 a day. Fernanda, if you refuse again, you'll really be pushing your luck. I put down the shears and pretended to consider her offer. In reality, I was studying Elisa's expression. My gut told me this was her limit, so I reluctantly nodded. All right. In my eyes, Elise was nothing more than a fat lamb ready for slaughter. She smiled, her gaze sweeping over me with disdain. In her eyes, I could practically see the words, "You're doomed." After Elise left, Ezekiel remained by my side, silently watching me. I grew impatient and headed inside, leaving my shears behind. $45,000 was enough to make you agree? Ezekiel called out in a slow, deliberate tone. I'll give you $450,000. What can you do for me? I tugged at the straps of my overalls without turning back. I'll build you a coffin with my own hands. Chapter 22. I had mentally prepared myself for the worst, but Elisa's revenge left me somewhat confused. Dominic and I led the way, occasionally explaining the local attractions to them. Elise barely paid attention, focusing instead on pestering me. I wanted to try that street food stand earlier, but Ezekiel said I'd get sick and forbade me from eating it. Fernanda, Was he ever this considerate of you? I shook my head, answering the little lamb's question. No. Ezekiel glanced at me. Elisa's smile widened, as if she had won something. Really? So how did he treat you back then? I thought about it and answered honestly. He usually told me to get lost, and he often threw medicine at my face and all over me. Ezekiel saw that Elise was about to speak again and interrupted her with a warning tone in his voice. That's enough, Elise. She acted as if she hadn't heard him and kept her eyes on me. Then she let out a theatrical wow. So scary. Does Ezekiel still do that? Because I only ever see his gentle side. Fernanda, why do you think that is? Dominic's face darkened as he grabbed my arm and started leading me toward the next shop. Let's check this place out. But Elise grabbed my other arm, not letting me leave. She smiled sweetly, but her gaze was fixed on me. Come on, answer. I sighed and gave her the answer she wanted. Because he likes you and doesn't like me. Elisa's smile grew even brighter. You're absolutely right. Fernanda, you really are a failure. Ezekiel's expression turned completely cold. Aren't you done yet? He tossed Elisa's bag back to her, lips curling in mockery. Don't you think you're lowering yourself by acting like this? Then he walked off without looking at anyone. Elise stubbornly widened her eyes, refusing to let the tears fall. She shot me a glare before stomping off. I stared at their retreating figures, lost in thought. Dominic patted my shoulder and comforted me. Don't take her words to heart. She's like a toad hopping on your foot, just trying to make you sick. I burst out laughing. I continued showing Dominic around the sights. I'm not bothered by it. Answering a few questions for $30,000? It's easy money. Elise thought humiliating me would make me feel bad, but she didn't realize I'd already stopped liking Ezekiel. Her questions didn't hurt me at all, honestly. If I could spend the next 14 days doing nothing but answering these same questions and earn $450,000, that would be perfect. Chapter 23. Ezekiel came back late again that night. He cornered me in the yard. The faint smell of alcohol on him. His gaze was so focused. It was as if he was trying to see into my soul. You're wrong. I don't dislike you. His voice was hoarse. I just thought I didn't like you enough. I measured the distance between us and calmly reminded him. You're already emotionally cheating. He didn't hear me, only stubbornly asking. Why didn't you tell me before you left? You heard what happened at the mall last year. Why didn't you come ask me? You thought I'd definitely kick you out, didn't you? Ezekiel's voice trembled slightly, his eyes swirling with a storm of emotions. Fernanda, I hadn't even made up my mind yet. What gave you the right to decide for me? Who gave you that right? His string of questions pulled me back to the day that made me give up on him. That day, the coolness of the milk tea seeped into my palm, and then, into my whole body. I saw Ezekiel holding Elise tightly in his arms, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Even from a distance, I could feel the intensity of his emotions. It's pathetic to admit, but my first reaction was jealousy toward Elise. Then came a flood of negative emotions weighing down on me. I stared at Ezekiel, then I raised my hand and slapped him hard across the face. You can't let go of Elise, but you won't release me either. Because of your indecision. Elise went mad questioning me, but instead, you blamed her for being cheap. And now, you're putting the blame for my leaving on me. Ezekiel, you're rotten. You're even worse than Elise. Ezekiel let out a bitter laugh. You're right. I'm a scumbag. I shoved him away forcefully and walked past him. The boy behind me called out softly again. Fernanda, I can change. Ignoring him would likely make him think I was giving in. So I told him, firmly and resolutely, but I won't give you another chance. Chapter 24. Ezekiel didn't come out of his room all day the next day. I was a little worried he might have died. After all, a death in our guest house would seriously hurt business. Elisa's eyes were swollen, and she didn't feel like going out either. Looking exhausted, she transferred the $450,000 to me and said lifelessly, I won't shortchange you a single cent. Unlike you, I'm not so desperate for money. Country bumpkin. She couldn't resist throwing in a parting shot. A day later, Ezekiel and Elise were getting ready to leave. The pleasant surprise came out of nowhere. It seemed the two had broken up. They kept a significant distance from each other. Before leaving, Ezekiel asked me, "Do you regret coming to take care of me last year?" I thought about it seriously. Not really. Because, enough. Ezekiel cut me off. His eyes cast downward. That's enough for me. It wasn't until after they left that I realized he probably thought my lack of regret had something to do with him. I had meant to say it was because I got to meet Dominic. Chapter 25. I showed Dominic around the whole town. I had planned to take him to some other places for a few days, but Nanny Lee urged him to go back. She said, "The young master is back. So why are you still staying over there? What's going on in your head? How can you let the young master come back on his own? Don't you know it's dangerous for him to be alone?" Dominic didn't say much, just quietly agreed. Soon after, he returned to the Ma family. I continued with my life as usual, waiting for my college acceptance letter while occasionally sharing interesting stories with Dominic. Whenever he saw them, he would laugh along and tell me even funnier stories. He was always full of positive energy and emotional support. The turning point came in my sophomore year. Dominic had been accompanying Ezekiel on a trip when they were involved in a car accident. Good news, Dominic only suffered minor injuries. Another piece of good news, Ezekiel's legs were seriously injured, and he would likely need a wheelchair for the rest of his life. He was back to being unable to take care of himself. Bad news, Dominic was diagnosed with severe depression. Chapter 26. Nanny Lee and the Ma family rushed to the hospital together. When Nanny Lee saw Dominic outside the hospital room, the first thing she did was grab him and ask, "How is the young master? Speak up! Where is he?" Dominic quietly stared at her and asked, "Did it ever occur to you that I almost died?" Nanny Lee's eyes searched the rooms for any sign of Ezekiel as she replied, "But you're fine, aren't you? You're standing right here, perfectly okay." And that single sentence completely shattered Dominic. He attempted suicide by slashing his wrists, cutting deep. After being saved, he told his therapist, "It's not that I couldn't go on living. I just thought that if I died, my mom would regret it. I wanted to get back at her." It's a common affliction among some East Asian kids. But Dominic took it to the extreme, and Nanny Lee, as he had wished, indeed regretted it. She cried and apologized, explaining that she only saw Ezekiel as the son of her employers and had gotten used to putting him first. Dominic remained indifferent. Chapter 27. Dominic took a break from school and moved with Nanny Lee to my hometown. This time, I finally took Dominic to my flower field. He was casually snacking on sunflower seeds, laughing and chatting with me as if nothing had happened. I knew it was just his INFJ personality pushing him into extreme people-pleasing mode. It drove him to these subconscious actions. Inside, he was already rotting away. I set aside a small section of the flower field for him, hoping it would give him a reason to keep living. That day, I got an unexpected call from Elise. She stammered for a long while before finally saying, "Then can you at least return 400,000 of the 450,000? Even giving you 50,000 is already a lot." I firmly refused. Elise snapped, her angry shout crackling through the phone line, sounding particularly harsh. "Fine. Don't give it back. Are you kidding? Do I even need that 400,000? And you are so fake." I hung up and blocked her before she could rant any further. I heard from Nanny Lee that Elisa's father had embezzled a large sum of money. Their villa was seized, but it still wasn't enough to pay off the debt. Even so, she refused to let go of her spoiled, high and mighty attitude. Dominic began showing signs of improvement in the second year. During one holiday, we went hiking together. When we reached the summit, he shouted into the open valley, "In the darkest times, no one pulled me out of the abyss. But that's okay. I'll be the one to do it." He had slightly reworded a quote from Mika Nakashima, and then he had it tattooed on his body. After I graduated from college, I returned to town to take over the third guest house my family owned. I also expanded the flower field. From time to time, I'd ride my electric tricycle at full speed to pick up Dominic, dragging him along to watch the latest comedies. I still remember the first time I went to Ezekiel's house. I felt like a kid on a reality show about city kids and rural kids switching places. With my oversized backpack, I felt completely out of place. Whenever Ezekiel's brothers mocked me, I would tell myself in frustration, one day, I'm going to earn enough money to buy a house here and become their neighbor. I'm not a bumpkin. I can dress like a princess too. I had imitated the way the kids in the villa district walked, talked, even dressed. Looking back now, I don't think I was ridiculous. I'm just grateful. Grateful that I woke up from that obsession with comparing myself to others. On a summer night, I lay back in a rocking chair, eyes closed, lightly fanning myself. I softly whispered to the little town that falls asleep by 9:30 p.m. Good night.